A lot of people might argue that with new GPUs and CPUs coming out towards the end of the year, that this isn't really a great time to build a PC. However, a lot of prices have been coming down significantly. So I think if you're actually planning on building something that's kind of a mid-range to low-end PC, a good value, bang for the buck, you're going to get solid performance, but you don't need to be shooting for the like 120 FPS 4K gaming or something insane like that. I think this is actually a great time to build, because the thing is, the new CPUs and GPUs that come out towards the end of this year are not going to be the greatest bang for the buck. So I'm going to show you how to put together an excellent gaming PC here, and I'm going to talk you through all of the choices that we make so that if the prices change a bit by the time you're building, you understand why we made the choices we did so that you could adjust that choice if you need to. And we'll also look into, what could you spend a little bit more on if you wanted to, what are the trade-offs, all of that. So let's hop into PC Part Picker. I'm not sponsored by them. This is just a great place to throw together a build and look at pricing, things like that. So let me get out of the way. So when you're doing your gaming PC build, the most important thing for a gaming PC is the video card. And we'll talk a whole bunch about that. And then the next most important thing is the CPU. Basically, the CPU needs to be good enough to be able to feed your video card and not bog it down. That's how you should read into this. So the CPU is important, although the video card's more important, and we'll get new CPUs out towards the end of the year, but the prices, because we got new things coming out towards the end of this year, on some of the really, really solid gaming CPUs here that are going to be great for years to come, have come way down. The best price to performance here are either the 5600 from AMD or the 12400 from Intel. Now, in my last few build guide videos, a month or so ago, and previously, I've usually recommended the 12400F from Intel because it's been priced the same or less than the 5600 from AMD. However, that's no longer the case. Right now, the 12400F, by the way, the difference between the 400 and the 400F, they have no real performance difference as a CPU. It's just that the F version doesn't have the integrated graphics, which is handy to have, but if you have a dedicated graphics card, which we'll have for a gaming build here, you don't really need that. Although it's nice to have if anything goes wrong with your GPU. But anyway, this CPU is great for gaming. However, the 5600 from AMD is almost as good. And right now, this is the lowest price I have ever seen it for. But if you're following along with this build, and the prices are different, if that 12400F costs about the same, you might want to seriously consider going that route instead. But as of right now, this 5600 from AMD is only $144. This is a fantastic gaming CPU, and I think you'll be very happy with this. Now, you might be like, it's only 6 cores. I've heard that you need 8 cores. I don't want to bog down on this, but for gaming, 6 cores on a fast 6-core CPU like this is absolutely fine, and I recommend checking out the recent hardware unboxed videos they've done, comparing the 5600 versus the 5700, even with background tasks going, to simulate you have like your Discord going and you've got some web browsers open, playing a YouTube video while you're gaming. And it's really, from a cost perspective, if you wanted to go up to a 5700, it's a huge price increase. Like here we're seeing the 5700X here for $250. You're spending over $100 more. And trust me, you are not going to get a massive difference in gaming performance. Those extra CPU cores will be very handy if you're going to be doing CPU-heavy productivity tasks. But for gaming, this is the way to go. Now, don't get the 5600G thinking that you're getting integrated graphics for the same price. You get the integrated graphics, but it's a significantly worse CPU and overall platform. Just look into the details on that if you want to. It's not as simple as this one has graphics and this one doesn't. They're actually different in their CPU performance. And the 5600X is currently costing an extra $45 for only a couple percent increase in CPU performance in gaming. It's really not going to be worth it to spend that extra money in pretty much any situation. So this is by far, if you're buying today, the best bang for your buck CPU. This thing is fantastic, and it can support some high-end GPUs. Now, once you've locked in your CPU, here's the other value point coming from these 6-core CPUs. And this is applies to the 12400 as well if you end up going the Intel route. They come with a stock cooler that gets the job done. It's not going to be the quietest and it's not going to be the coolest, but it will get the job done so you can save some money on a CPU cooler. If you want to spend $30 on a cheap CPU cooler, you can, but you're not going to get $30 worth of performance out of that. Maybe if you're hung up on the noise or something, it could be worth it. But I'm going to say you can add in that CPU cooler later, or you can do it now if you really, really want to. But from a value performance perspective, I don't think it's worth it over the stock cooler. Now, motherboards. The one disadvantage to going with the AMD chip here is that there's the motherboard situation can get confusing because you're looking at the AM4 socket, and these have been supported for so long that there's a million motherboards that support this, and some of them are as low as $55, even new. But the problem is this is a really old and really low-end motherboard. Yes, it will support your CPU, but you're making a lot of trade-offs here. Also, there's the likelihood that if you buy an old motherboard, it might not support, the BIOS that it has might need to be updated before it supports your 5600 you bought. And if you don't have any other CPU to put in there to update the BIOS, that could be a problem. Now, some motherboards support flashing the BIOS with a USB flash drive, and then you should probably be okay. But what I'm gonna do for support for more modern features, and more likely to not need to update the BIOS, to get it working, but I'll also pick one that has BIOS flash available. We're going to limit ourselves to the B550 motherboards here. But again, you could get something else for a little bit cheaper if you really wanted to save some money here. Now, there are some cheap B550s available if you really need to stretch every penny out of your budget. However, I'm going to spend a little bit more, and I'm going to go up to this MSI board right here, the B550M Pro VDH Wi-Fi, for a couple of reasons. Some people really need that Wi-Fi support for where they're placing their gaming PC. If you don't need that, then consider dropping down. Another thing here is that this supports BIOS flashing with the flash drive. So even if this doesn't ship with a BIOS that supports our CPU, that's not going to cause you a massive headache. This also has tons of 5-star reviews here, so I'm going to go ahead and grab this one. But to be clear, you can save some money on your motherboard choice if you want to. This just has a lot of features that people would be interested in, like that Wi-Fi, BIOS flashing, a little better components, four RAM slots, a lot of things that would be nice to have. Now, from a memory perspective, this can affect gaming performance. You might want to consider going up to 32 gigabytes of RAM if you really want to, but for the vast majority of situations, and we're looking at a value-conscious thing, as long as you go 2x8 instead of going 1x16, 16 gigabytes of RAM is still your bang for the buck sweet spot. Although again, you could spend more and go up to 32 gigabytes. It's not that much more money. Now, when you go 2x8, you can look at the speeds and the cache latency. And we can see here that it's only going to be spending an extra $1 to go up to the 3200 CL16 RAM that we've got here, which is going to be noticeably better than these top two chips for basically the same price. So for less than $50, we're getting perfectly solid RAM. 3200 CL16 RAM is completely fine. And again, we're getting 16 gigabytes of that. You could spend more and get 32 gigabytes. Now, if you're worried about RAM speeds, that matters more if you're in CPU-limited esports gaming situations, and there's particular games that are very memory sensitive. I know that Call of Duty Warzone is one of those games. But in most gaming where you're GPU limited, the RAM speeds is going to make very little difference on your actual gaming performance. So if you're going super esports focused, maybe consider spending more on your CPU and memory to get both of those to be faster. But I think for most people, this is going to be just fine. And it's a great price. Now, storage. Okay, so storage isn't, you should get an SSD. Like, definitely get an SSD. Now, how much space do you need? Personally, I would like to get at least a terabyte, although if you're really trying to save money, you could go down to 500 gigabytes, okay? I'm gonna look for a terabyte because it's not usually that much more money. And I think that with game install sizes these days, you're gonna like having the terabyte, and you might want to get a second one in the future. I'm gonna search by SSDs for at least 1,000 gigabytes, and I'm gonna sort price low to high and look at what's available here. Now, some of the cheapest ones are gonna be SATA drives, which are gonna be noticeably slower than your NVMe drives. Although not every NVMe drive is actually that fast. Like this Team Group MS30, if it's the one I'm thinking of, is actually about the same speed as these SATA drives. But this Team Group MP33 is actually fairly fast. Not as fast as like a Gen 4 drive, but it's going to be more than fast enough for gaming and booting and running programs. And this is only $70 for that 1 terabyte drive. We're going to go with this one. You can look into different drives here. You could also consider going up to a PCIe 4.0 drive if you really want to be future-proofing for like direct storage and things like that, but I think this is going to be good enough for most people. Also, if you get this Gen 3 drive, you can put it in your Gen 3 slot on your motherboard and save a 4.0 capable slot in your motherboard. I believe this motherboard does support 2 M.2 slots. I don't know. Anyway, we could look into that if you're interested in it. And you could upgrade to a 4.0 drive in the future, or just spend a little bit extra and get one now. Now, the case doesn't really, I'll come back to the video card in a minute. Let's get the rest of the build locked up, and then we'll talk about the video card, which is the most important part of your PC build. But let's talk cases. So if you just sort cases priced low to high, you can see the cheapest possible cases are in the $40 to $50 range. But you're probably not going to want to buy one of the $40 or $50 cases. First of all, if they don't come with any fans, you're going to have to pay for fans. And case manufacturers can get fans cheaper than you can, which means it's probably cheaper to buy a case with fans than to buy a case with no fans and have to buy your own fans. Also, super cheap cases can just really be a pain to build in, like literally a pain. They might have sharp pieces of metal that you cut yourself on. But that being said, you also don't need to go overkill on your case either. I really like the brand Fantex, and sometimes they have some good prices on some solid cases here. These two right here, either the P400 or the P300A mesh would be good choices for $70. Notice that's not that much more than you'd be paying for the absolute lowest end cases. But if we look at the P400A, the main problem that people wouldn't like on this one, the P400, is that this is not the A version, so you don't get the mesh front, although you do get at least one fan in the back, and I think for a lot of people, this would absolutely do the job. If you want the mesh front, and again, if you want to go with fan, you can look through whatever cases are available when you're looking. The P300A mesh does have a mesh front, and it does have at least one fan. I don't think it puts any fans in the front for you, so you could upgrade those for yourself in the future. But this will pull enough air through for the kind of parts that we're talking in this build that I think you'd be fine either way here. I think I'm going to go ahead and go with the mesh front version, or else I'll get people yelling at me that I didn't get a mesh front on my case. But I think either of those would be good choices. But guys, there's lots of other case choices you could go with, and look at the pricing and everything in reviews when you're picking. There's also just, the looks to consider. Okay, I like the look of these myself, so I think this is a great choice for the price. Now, power supply. You could go overkill here if you want one that could support a huge GPU upgrade in the future. I'm going to go a little bit overboard, which is going to get us something that can support way more than the type of GPU that we'll put in this system. But it's not going to support, like your 3090 Ti or something like that. Or one of, if the rumors are true, one of the massive power draw GPUs that that will be coming out soon. But this will support a reasonable GPU in the future. So if you sort prices low to high, there's some absolute junk out there. If you sort by 80 plus gold, it's going to help eliminate some of the absolute garbage, but that doesn't mean that everything that's 80 plus gold is actually quality. 80 plus gold is sometimes misunderstood as a quality rating, but it's an efficiency rating. It's talking about how power efficient your CPU is, your PSU is. It doesn't mean that there isn't junk with an 80 plus gold rating, although it does help eliminate some of the junk when you sort this way. Now, what I'm going to look for here, get myself out of the way, is I'm going to look for a reputable brand. I'm going to look at the wattage. It's also nice to get modular, although it's absolutely not necessary. That just means that the cables can come off and you don't need to plug in the cables that you don't actually need for your build. And then we're also going to look at the user reviews and the price. Now, a lot of times the EVGA units, you can get something pretty good for pretty cheap. Like, okay, EVGA Supernova GA, 80 plus gold, 650 watts, fully modular, with a whole bunch of 5-star reviews for only $60. And 650 watts on a quality power supply can actually support a pretty high-end GPU, much bigger than the ones that we're going to be fitting in on this build. So I'm going to grab this one. If you want to go overkill on this, I don't actually blame you if you want a lot of upgradability in the future. So that's something to think about. It's actually something to think about with both a case and a power supply. As long as they're good enough, it doesn't really hurt your build to go really cheap on these as long as they actually work and support your components. But a good case and power supply can survive many, many builds. You could keep these for a long time, even when you're fully rebuilding your system. So that's an argument for overspending on your case and power supply. But anyways, this all comes in at $500. So now we have basically the entire rest of our budget for the GPU. Now, by far the best bang for your buck on a graphics cards right now is the RX 6600. Okay? The RX 6600 is a fantastic 1080p gaming GPU. This thing is going to absolutely deliver high to ultra settings in the latest AAA games at around 60 FPS. And if you're willing to turn down to medium settings, it's going to give you pretty high refresh rate experience if you're looking for that. And if you're looking for higher refresh rates and more of an esports experience, those aren't nearly as demanding as these single player AAA games. And so you can definitely turn down settings as well. And this is going to once again deliver really great performance. So the RX 6600 is a great choice. The NVIDIA competition is completely overpriced considering the prices we can get on these RX 6600s. The RTX 3050 from NVIDIA is priced at $330. Sure, its MSRP is $250, and at $250, it's sort of okay, but the RX 6600 is still better for only a little bit more. But these actually end up costing you around $330, and they're absolute garbage for that price. Just complete garbage for that price, considering the performance difference. Now, the RTX 2060 from NVIDIA is priced at around $300 new for the 6GB version. And these are actually better than the RTX 3050 in most situations. So if you have to go with NVIDIA, the RTX 2060 might be a better choice. But unless you need NVIDIA-specific features, like certain productivity apps are better supported by NVIDIA, you need that streaming encoder that looks a little bit better at the low streaming bit rates, or some other reason, you don't trust AMD drivers or something like that. If you have to go NVIDIA, and you have to buy new, the RTX 2060 is a better performer than that 3050. But again, the RX 6600, if you're not locked into, you have to get NVIDIA, is going to be by far the best bang for the buck gaming GPU for 1080p. And you could stretch it to like medium settings at 1440p if you have to. But it's really a great 1080p GPU. So I'm going to say that for my build, I'd recommend this. Now, when you look at the pricing here, this $260 one is actually relying on a $20 mail-in rebate. And mail-in rebates, you can trust sometimes. I do get horror stories of MSI mail-in rebates never actually processing. So there's that. For no mail-in rebate, but other than that, the same price, the Speedster Swift, is actually the model I have. It does a good job. Anyway, for the sake of if you do want to count the rebate, getting the lowest price, I'm going to slot this one into the build. And that brings our build to barely over $750. If you don't count the mail-in rebate, okay, we're up to like $780. Now, This is a fantastic 1080p gaming machine, but the thing is, this CPU can absolutely support a higher end GPU. So if it's in your budget, the next upgrade you should make is absolutely the video card. Everything in this system, including the power supply, can support a much stronger GPU and not bottleneck it in the vast majority of situations. So the last thing I'll talk about here is if you do want to spend more, the best bang for your buck is upgrading this GPU. Now, if you just go up to the 6600 XT, you're going all the way up to $320. So it's about 15 to 20% faster, depending on the game, than the RX 6600 non-XT. So it's a little bit hard to argue that it's worth it, especially since there's only this one model that's even this cheap, and that's also relying on a $20 mail-in rebate. So that's where I was saying where that baseline 6600 is the best bang for the buck. Now, if you want to go up to 1440p, I really recommend the 6700 XT as being the best bang for the buck. There is a non-XT version that has come available, but it's not currently in stock anywhere. So the 6700 XT is a great price to performance. It's comparable with the RTX 3060 Ti from NVIDIA. And I've done head-to-head comparisons of these. And actually, if they're priced about the same, if you care at all about ray tracing and upscaling, the 3060 Ti might be the better choice there. But you can look at some of my head-to-head comparisons if you'd like to really get a better idea of exactly how all of those stack up. But basically, look into my GPU comparison videos if you want to go higher end on the GPUs than this. The one thing I'll say is if you start going beyond this point on the GPUs, keep in mind that the higher end new GPUs will be coming out towards the end of this year, and so the high-end GPUs will probably still be seeing the prices come down a bit. But the RX 6600, I think, is going to stay around this price unless NVIDIA actually starts lowering its prices anytime soon. So I think this is an absolute safe buy. You're not going to see prices drop significantly from here anytime soon. So overall, I think that this is by far the best bang for the buck PC that you can build right now if you're buying new parts. The other place you could look into is if you're willing to go used. There's certainly starting to be some good deals out there on used GPUs, but you do have to worry about, actually, make sure you buy from a site that gets you some customer protection, where you can get returns if it ends up being damaged or faulty or not getting what you thought you were going to get, bad crypto mining card or something like that. All right, guys, we're going to end this build video here, but like I said, look into some of my other videos where I talk about upgrading, video cards, head-to-head comparisons. Every month I usually do a best GPUs to buy value in all the different price ranges. I do have one for July, although it's a couple weeks old, so some of the prices have changed a bit since then. I hope all of you have an excellent day.